The air in Pine Creek, Colorado carried the crisp, clean promise of approaching winter. It was early October and the mountains that cradled the town were a breathtaking tapestry of gold crimson and deep evergreen. A light frost had silvered the edges of the pine needles overnight, and now as the morning sun climbed over the peaks, it melted into glistening droplets that caught the light like tiny diamonds. The scent of pine and damp earth was a constant welcome companion. This was the peace Eleanor Sullivan had been searching for. Eleanor, a woman in her late 70s with soft white hair pinned neatly in a bun and eyes the color of a gentle sky, pulled her knitted shawl tighter around her shoulders. She was a widow, a woman who had navigated the storms of a long life with quiet grace that was often mistaken for fragility. But beneath the surface, there was a core of resilient steel forged in love loss and the steadfast raising of a remarkable son. That son, Michael Sullivan, had recently helped her move to a beautiful, secluded house on the edge of Lake Serenity, just outside of town. The property had been in her late husband's family for generations, passed down to Eleanor after his death. It was more than just land, it was the physical embodiment of memories, dreams, and promises. Eleanor had resisted selling it even during the lean years, and now she was finally able to build a modest home there, insisting she deserved a sanctuary away from the noise of the city. This extended vacation was her chance to finally enjoy her inheritance, a place for her to breathe. She pushed open the glass door of Mountain View Diner, a bell tinkling cheerfully to announce her arrival. The diner was the heart of Pine Creek, a cozy haven of worn wooden booths, red vinyl stools, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, sizzling bacon, and maple syrup. It was exactly the kind of place Eleanor loved, unpretentious and warm. Behind the counter, a young woman named Rachel Miller moved with an efficiency that belied her age. Rachel, barely in her mid-20s, had a sharp, observant gaze and a mane of dark, curly hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She had grown up in Pine Creek and understood its rhythms, both the gentle currents and the dangerous undertows. She offered Eleanor a quick, genuine smile. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning, ma'am. Just yourself today?" "Just me." Eleanor confirmed, her voice soft but clear. "A booth by the window if it's not too much trouble." "Not at all." As Eleanor settled into the booth, her gaze drifted to the scene outside. A young man, probably a tourist, was setting up a camera on a tripod across the street. This was Ryan Davis, a documentary filmmaker with a modest but growing following known for his Forgotten America series. He was a bundle of optimistic energy with a bright smile and a trendy beanie pulled over his blonde hair. He adjusted his lens, hoping to capture the idyllic charm of the diner, the perfect establishing shot for his video on the hidden gems of Colorado. Eleanor's peaceful moment was shattered by a booming voice that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. "Well, well, look what we have here. More city money gracing us with its presence." The voice belonged to Curtis Reed. He was a large, imposing man in his early 50s, a local contractor whose bulk was built more from beer and grievances than hard labor. His face was perpetually flushed, and his small, calculating eyes scanned the diner as if he owned it. He wore a dusty work coat and a sneer that seemed permanently etched onto his lips. He was sitting in a corner booth with two other men, quiet sycophants, who chuckled on cue. Eleanor chose to ignore him, turning her attention to the menu, but Curtis wasn't a man to be ignored. He heaved himself out of his booth, his heavy boots thudding on the linoleum floor as he made his way over to her. The low hum of conversation in the diner faltered and died. Everyone knew Curtis, and everyone knew to stay out of his way. He stopped beside her table, casting a large shadow over her. "Don't see many of your kind in here. Usually stick to those fancy bistros up on the peak." Eleanor looked up at him, her expression calm. "I find the coffee here is much better," she replied politely. Behind the counter, Rachel's smile had vanished. Her jaw was tight. She knew exactly what this was. Curtis Reed was the blunt instrument for Sterling Croft, the developer trying to buy up the entire lakeshore. Croft's specialty was convincing reluctant sellers. Curtis's specialty was making those convincing arguments more physical. Rachel slowly reached under the counter, her fingers finding her phone. She propped it up discreetly between a napkin dispenser and a stack of menus, making sure the camera had a clear view of Eleanor's booth and press record. This wasn't the first time she'd seen Curtis bully someone, but this time felt different, more vicious. Curtis's sneer widened. "Is that right? Well, enjoy it while you can. Some of us are trying to preserve what makes this town special, not turn it into some playground for rich folks who don't belong." I assure you I have no intention of changing your town. Eleanor said, her voice remaining steady, though she could feel a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She thought of her late husband, a man of immense kindness and quiet strength. He would have known how to handle a man like Curtis Reed, not with aggression, but with a firm, unshakable dignity that would make a bully feel small. She channeled that memory, that strength. Outside, Ryan Davis noticed the confrontation through the window. He zoomed his camera in, intrigued by the unfolding drama. "Oh, I think you do." Curtis shot back, his voice rising, drawing the attention of everyone in the diner, including Ryan. "I hear you're the one holding up progress over at the lake. Got a real nice offer for that property your son bought, but you're just too stubborn to see sense." So that was it. This wasn't a random act of hostility, it was targeted. It was about the land, the family land. Michael had warned her that the developer was aggressive, but she hadn't expected this. "The house is not for sale," Eleanor stated, her tone final. "My husband left that land to our family." Curtis leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "Your family, you mean the son who's never here, the one who drops a pile of cash on a house and leaves his old mother here to be a thorn in the side of hardworking local folks." He rested his thick, grease-stained knuckles on her table. "This is a small-town lady. We have our own way of doing things. We don't appreciate outsiders coming in, buying up prime real estate, and refusing to play ball. It messes with the natural order of things." Eleanor could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her. She saw fear in some faces, annoyance in others, but no one moved to intervene. The town had been under Croft's thumb for too long. Everyone had been conditioned to look the other way. "Curtis, that's enough." Rachel's voice cut through the tension. She had stepped out from behind the counter, her phone still recording. "The woman just wants to enjoy her breakfast." Curtis turned his glare on Rachel, his face darkening. "You should mind your own business, girl. You're not from the old families either. Your kind is just as much a problem as hers." Her kind, Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. "My kind has been serving you breakfast for 3 years while you throw your weight around. Now back off and let Mrs. Sullivan eat in peace." Curtis's expression twisted with fury. He took a threatening step toward Rachel. She held her ground, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew what Curtis was capable of. Everyone in town did. But she had also reached her limit on watching him bully people. The diner had gone completely silent. The only sound was the sizzle of bacon on the grill and the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. Outside, Ryan continued filming, his expression growing more concerned by the moment. He pulled out his own phone, ready to call for help if things escalated further. Curtis's face was now inches from Rachel's. "You think you can talk to me like that?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You forget your place, girl. I could make sure you never work in this town again. My place is right here, standing up to bullies like you." Rachel's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Curtis's arm shot out suddenly, shoving Rachel hard. She stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of the counter. She lost her balance, falling awkwardly and twisting her wrist as she tried to catch herself. A sharp cry of pain escaped her as she landed on the floor. Eleanor rose to her feet immediately. "Stop this at once," she commanded, her voice stronger than anyone would have expected from a woman her age. Curtis turned back to her, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Or what, old lady? You'll call your boy. Tell him to come rescue his mama." He took a threatening step toward Eleanor, his bulk towering over her. Across the street, Ryan was already running toward the diner, his phone to his ear. But before he reached it, another vehicle pulled up sharply at the curb. A rugged pickup truck with Sullivan Canine Training emblazoned on the door. Michael Sullivan emerged from the driver's side, his face set in grim determination. He was a man in his mid-40s with the lean, powerful build of someone who stayed combat-ready long after leaving active service. His dark hair was cut short, and his eyes scanned the scene with the practiced assessment of a man who had navigated far more dangerous situations than this. He had been headed to drop his daughter Emma off at school when he'd received Rachel's urgent text. "Daddy, what's happening?" Emma asked, her 12-year-old face pressed against the passenger window, concerned. "Stay in the truck, Emma." Michael's voice was calm but brooked no argument. "Just a misunderstanding I need to clear up." He strode toward the diner with purpose, his movements fluid and controlled. Through the glass, he could see Curtis looming over his mother. Michael's jaw tightened, but his expression remained composed. He hadn't survived multiple combat deployments by letting emotion cloud his judgment. Inside the diner, Curtis was still on his tirade, unaware of Michael's approach. I'm just making sure your mother understands how things work around here. This town has a way of dealing with people who don't cooperate. Accidents happen, houses burn. It would be a shame if... The bell above the door jingled as Michael stepped inside the sound, cutting Curtis off mid-threat. The atmosphere in the diner shifted immediately. Michael wasn't an imposing man the way Curtis was. He didn't rely on bulk or bluster, but something in his presence commanded attention. It was in his eyes, in the way he held himself, in the absolute certainty of his movements. Emma, despite her father's instructions, had slipped out of the truck and now stood in the doorway watching wide-eyed as her father approached the tense scene. Michael took in the situation with a glance. Rachel on the floor nursing her wrist. His mother standing defiant but shaken, Curtis red-faced and aggressive. Is there a problem here? Michael's voice was quiet, controlled, but carried an undercurrent of steel that made several diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. Curtis turned, momentarily caught off guard by Michael's sudden appearance. Well, if it isn't the prodigal son, come to rescue Mama. He attempted a sneer, but it lacked his earlier confidence. Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he moved to help Rachel to her feet, his eyes assessing her injury. You okay? His words were soft, meant only for her. Just twisted my wrist. I'll be fine. Rachel's eyes locked with his, conveying more than her words. The diner's silent collective cowardice hung in the air between them. Michael nodded, helping her to a chair, before turning his attention back to Curtis. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make any aggressive moves. He simply stood between Curtis and his mother, his presence a shield. Mr. Reed, I believe you were just leaving. The tone was conversational, but the message was unmistakable. Curtis puffed up his chest. You don't tell me what to do, Sullivan. You're not in the sandbox anymore playing soldier. Michael's expression didn't change. No, I'm not. I'm in a diner where you just assaulted a young woman and threatened my mother. One option is I call Sheriff Dawson, though we both know whose payroll he's on. The other option is you walk out that door right now and reconsider whether intimidating women and the elderly is really the legacy you want in this town. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Every eye was on the two men, the contrast between them striking. Curtis all bluster and crude intimidation. Michael calm, measured, but with a coiled readiness that spoke of far more dangerous capability. For a moment, it seemed like Curtis might escalate, might throw a punch, or continue his threats. But something in Michael's steady gaze gave him pause. Maybe it was the absolute lack of fear, or maybe it was the quiet certainty that if violence erupted, Curtis would not be the victor. Curtis broke first, his eyes darting away. This isn't over, Sullivan. You and your mother would do well to remember that you're guests here. His voice attempted to maintain its threatening edge, but the effect was diminished. We're not guests, Mr. Reed. My family's land has been here for generations. Longer than Croft Development has been buying up the town. Michael stepped aside slightly, creating a clear path to the door. Have a good day. Curtis hesitated, then stormed past Michael, deliberately bumping his shoulder as he went. Michael didn't react, didn't shift his stance at all, which somehow made Curtis look even more petty. Curtis pushed past Emma in the doorway, causing her to stumble slightly. His two cronies scrambled to follow, leaving cash hastily thrown on their table. As the door slammed behind them, the diner remained silent for a moment. Then gradually the murmur of conversation resumed, though significantly subdued. Michael turned to his mother, concern replacing the steel in his eyes. Mom, are you okay? I'm fine, Michael. Really? Eleanor's voice was steady, but Michael could see the slight tremble in her hands as she adjusted her shawl. She looked past him to Emma, who still stood in the doorway, her young face a mixture of concern and awe. Come here, sweetheart. Emma rushed to her grandmother, wrapping her in a tight hug. Why was that man being so mean to you, Grandma? Eleanor stroked Emma's hair. Some people forget their manners when they want something they can't have. Ryan Davis entered the diner, camera in hand, his expression a mixture of concern and journalistic interest. He approached their table cautiously. Excuse me, I'm Ryan Davis. I'm a documentary filmmaker. He directed this primarily to Michael. I caught that whole interaction on camera. This isn't the first incident I've seen in town since I've been here. Michael assessed Ryan quickly. Young Ernest, probably without an agenda beyond his film. I'm Michael Sullivan. This is my mother, Eleanor, and my daughter, Emma. Ryan nodded to each of them. I've been in Pine Creek for about 2 weeks documenting small-town America. But I've witnessed at least 3 similar interactions, always involving Croft Development employees or affiliates. Michael's interest was piqued. You have footage. Lots of it. Ryan glanced around the diner, lowering his voice. And people have been talking. Off the record, of course. Everyone's afraid of Croft and Mayor Thorne. They've got the whole town locked down tight. Meanwhile, Rachel had disappeared into the back room to ice her wrist. She returned now, a makeshift ice pack held against her arm. Michael turned to her, genuine concern in his eyes. You should get that looked at. Can't afford the urgent care copay. Rachel attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll be fine. Thanks for stepping in. Michael studied her for a moment. How long has this been going on, the intimidation? Rachel glanced around the diner, then back to Michael. Since Croft announced the resort development plan last year. At first, it was just pressure at town meetings. Then it became more direct. She lowered her voice. 3 families on Lakeshore Drive had mysterious house fires after refusing to sell. Insurance called them accidents, but everyone knows. Eleanor's face showed shock. Why doesn't someone do something? Rachel gave her a sad smile. Sheriff's on Thorne's payroll. State police say it's a local matter. The newspaper editor sold his land to Croft and moved away. Anyone who speaks up faces consequences. Lost jobs, vandalism, social isolation. She gestured to the other diners who were studiously avoiding looking in their direction. Everyone's just trying to survive until the storm passes. Emma, who had been listening intently, spoke up. But that's not right. Someone needs to stop them. Michael placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. You're right, Em. It's not right. His eyes met Rachel's. We should get your wrist checked out. I know a guy, retired combat medic. No paperwork, no questions. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. My shift ends in 20 minutes. Michael turned to his mother and daughter. I'm going to take you both home, then help Rachel. Mom, I want you to stay at the house today. Emma, I'll call the school and let them know you'll be late. As they prepared to leave, Ryan approached again, more cautiously this time. Mr. Sullivan, I'd like to show you some of my footage. Maybe there's something there that could help. Michael considered him for a moment, then nodded. Come by the K-9 training center this afternoon. He handed Ryan a business card. Outside, Curtis Reed stood across the street, watching them through narrowed eyes as they exited the diner. His phone was pressed to his ear, his expression dark with fury and humiliation. The Sullivan home sat on a gentle slope overlooking Lake Serenity, a beautiful A-frame structure that blended harmoniously with the surrounding pines. The property extended down to a private dock on the crystal clear water and encompassed nearly 5 acres of pristine lakefront land, the last significant parcel not owned by Croft Development. Michael helped his mother into a comfortable chair on the covered deck, while Emma put on a kettle for tea. The view from the deck was breathtaking. Golden aspens reflected in the lake's mirror surface, mountains rising majestically beyond. The peace of the setting stood in stark contrast to the morning's events. I'm sorry you had to see that, Emma. Michael said once they were settled, his daughter curled up beside her grandmother. Emma shook her head, her expression serious beyond her years. I'm not. I'm glad I saw what kind of person he is. And what kind of person you are, Dad. Michael smiled softly at his daughter, always amazed by her perceptiveness. Still, I didn't want your first weeks in a new town to be like this. Eleanor sipped her tea thoughtfully. Perhaps we should consider selling Michael. I don't want to put you and Emma in danger. This land means a great deal to me, but not at the cost of your safety. Michael shook his head firmly. We're not selling, Mom. This land is your legacy, Dad's legacy. We're not letting some corrupt developer bully us out of our home. Emma's eyes shone with approval. We can fight back, right, Dad? Like you taught me. Stand up to bullies. Michael exchanged a look with his mother. Sometimes standing up means being smart about how we fight. He turned to Emma. I need to take Rachel to get her wrist checked. I want you to stay here with Grandma. Max will be here too. At the mention of his name, Max, a Belgian Malinois with intelligent eyes and a powerful build, trotted over from where he'd been lying in a patch of sunlight. He had been Michael's K-9 partner during his last deployment and now helped with the training center. The bond between them went beyond handler and dog. They had saved each other's lives more than once. Michael ran a hand over to Max's head. Keep an eye on things, buddy. Max's ears perked forward in understanding. Emma wrapped her arms around the dog's neck. We'll be fine, Dad. Max won't let anything happen to us. After making sure they were settled, Michael drove to the diner to pick up Rachel. Her wrist was beginning to swell, and she held it gingerly as she climbed into his truck. Thanks for this. Rachel's voice was quiet as they drove through town. Most people would have just walked away. Michael kept his eyes on the road. I'm not most people. No, you're not. She studied his profile. Navy SEAL, right? The way you handled Reed, that was military training. Michael glanced at her surprised. How'd you know? Rachel smiled slightly. My brother was Force Recon, Marines. I recognize the bearing the way you assess the situation. She paused. He didn't make it back from his last deployment. I'm sorry. Michael's response was simple but genuine. When did you get out? 4 years ago, after my wife's accident. Michael's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel, the only outward sign of the pain their memory still caused. Needed to be there for Emma. Rachel nodded in understanding, not pushing for details. The town wasn't always like this, you know. Before Croft and Thorne teamed up, Pine Creek was a good place. Small, sure, but people looked out for each other. What changed? Money. Rachel's tone was bitter. Croft showed up 2 years ago with plans for a luxury resort. Promised jobs, tourism dollars, tax revenue. Mayor Thorne got on board immediately. Then the pressure started on landowners who wouldn't sell. She looked out the window at the passing storefronts. First it was just harassment at town meetings, then vandalism, then the fires. Michael processed this information silently as they pulled up to a small house on the outskirts of town. A weather-beaten sign read Wilson's Woodworking hung beside the door. The man who answered Michael's knock was in his 60s with a full beard and hands gnarled from years of craftsmanship. His eyes lit up at the sight of Michael. Sullivan been too long, brother. Good to see you, Doc. Michael clasped the man's hand. Need a favor. This is Rachel. She took a bad fall, might have sprained her wrist. Doc Wilson ushered them inside, his demeanor shifting to professional efficiency as he examined Rachel's wrist. His living room had been converted to a small clinic, a remnant of his days as a combat medic in Vietnam. As Doc worked, Michael explained the situation at the diner. Wilson listened grimly, his expression darkening. Been seeing more and more of Reed's handiwork lately. Set Jackson Porter's broken nose last month after he refused to sell his fishing shop. Have the police done anything, Michael asked, though he already knew the answer. Doc snorted. Sheriff Dawson. He's Thorne's lapdog, wouldn't investigate a missing child if Croft told him not to. He finished wrapping Rachel's wrist in a professional brace. Mild sprain. I said keep it elevated. Should heal in a couple weeks. Rachel thanked him, reaching for her wallet, but Doc waved her off. Sullivan's friends don't pay. Just remember who helped you when things change in this town. On the drive back, Rachel was quiet, lost in thought. Finally, she turned to Michael. What are you going to do now? Michael's face was unreadable. First, I'm going to learn exactly what we're up against. Then I'm going to do what I was trained to do. Protect my family and neutralize the threat. Rachel studied him. You make it sound like a military operation. A slight smile touched Michael's lips. If there's one thing the teams taught me, it's that proper intelligence is the difference between success and failure. When they arrived back at the Sullivan home, they found Emma and Eleanor on the deck, with Max looking troubled. Michael immediately went on alert. What's wrong? Emma held up a rock with a paper wrapped around it. Someone threw this through the kitchen window while we were in the back garden with Max. There was fear in her eyes, but also anger. It says, last warning, sell or burn. Michael took the rock, his expression hardening as he read the crude note. His eyes scanned the tree line surrounding the property, every sense suddenly heightened. Rachel, take them inside. Stay away from the windows. Rachel didn't question him, quickly ushering Eleanor and Emma into the house as Michael moved with silent efficiency around the property perimeter, Max at his heel. The dog's ears were perked, his body tense as he searched for any lingering threat. Finding nothing immediate, Michael returned to the house, his mind already formulating plans. He found the three of them in the living room, Eleanor trying to maintain a calm facade for Emma's sake, but her hands trembled slightly as she arranged teacups. Dad, we're not going to let them scare us away, right? Emma's voice was determined despite the slight quaver. Michael knelt in front of his daughter, looking into eyes so like her mother's. No, we're not, but we're going to be smart about this. He glanced at Rachel. Do you need to get back to the diner? She shook her head. I got fired. Owner called while I was at Doc's, said I was causing trouble. Eleanor's face showed shock. That's outrageous. Rachel shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though the loss of income clearly worried her. It's how they operate. I'll find something else. Michael made a decision. Stay here tonight. We have plenty of room and I'd feel better knowing you're safe. He turned to his mother and daughter. We all need to be careful until I figure out our next steps. Later that afternoon, Ryan Davis arrived with his camera and laptop. He set up in Michael's home office, his youthful face serious as he queued up his footage. I've been documenting small towns across America for my series, but Pine Creek is different. The level of corruption is unlike anything I've seen. He played clips showing Curtis Reed and other men intimidating residents, secret meetings between Mayor Thorne and Sterling Croft, and interviews with frightened citizens speaking in hushed tones. But this is the most disturbing. Ryan pulled up footage of a nighttime meeting on the outskirts of town. Croft and Thorne were visible meeting with a man in an expensive suit whose face remained in shadow. Large amounts of cash change hands. Michael studied the footage intently. "Do you know who the third man is?" Ryan shook his head. "No, but whatever they're planning, it's bigger than just a resort. I've heard rumors about water rights mineral deposits. Something valuable enough to justify all this effort." Michael leaned back, processing. "How much of this have you shared?" Ryan looked uncomfortable. "None of it. I've been threatened twice since I started asking questions. Someone broke into my motel room last week, went through all my equipment." "Keep it that way for now." Michael's tone was decisive. "We need more intel before we make a move. Can I keep copies of this?" As Ryan was preparing to leave, Rachel approached him. "I heard at the diner that you're staying at the Pinecrest Motel." Ryan nodded. "Not the Ritz, but it works." Rachel exchanged a look with Michael. "That motel is owned by Croft's brother-in-law. If they know you have footage..." Michael immediately understood. "Ryan, pack your things. You're staying here until we sort this out." That night, after Emma was asleep, the adults gathered in the kitchen. Michael spread out maps of the town and property records he'd obtained from the county website. Eleanor watched her son work, recognizing the focused intensity she'd seen in her husband decades earlier when he faced challenges. "Michael, what exactly are we doing here?" Eleanor asked quietly. He looked up, his expression resolute. "We're fighting back Mom the right way." He turned to Rachel and Ryan. "I need to understand everything about Croft Thorne and their operation. Who they've pressured, who they've bought, where their money comes from. Ryan, your footage is a start, but we need more." Rachel leaned forward, her expression determined despite the pain in her wrist. "I've been hearing things at the diner for months. People talk when they think no one's listening." She began detailing rumors, connections, patterns of intimidation that had been established. As the night wore on, a clearer picture emerged. Sterling Croft wasn't just a developer. He was suspected of using his projects for money laundering. Mayor Thorne had gone from a modest income to unexplained wealth shortly after partnering with Croft. The luxury resort was likely a front for something more sinister. But what caught Michael's attention most was a detail Rachel mentioned almost in passing. The geological survey. Croft commissioned it privately last year. Word is he found something valuable under the lake properties, something worth millions. Eleanor's eyes widened. "Under my land." Michael's mind connected the dots. "That's why they want your property so badly. Mom, it's not just about completing the resort footprint. There's something underneath worth fighting for." The next morning, Michael dropped Emma at school with clear instructions to stay with groups, avoid isolated areas, and call immediately if anyone approached her. He then drove to the county records office using his military ID to access public documents. Hours of research confirmed his suspicions. Croft had been buying properties in a specific pattern, focusing on a geological formation that ran beneath the lakeshore with Eleanor's land at its center. When he returned home, he found Rachel and Eleanor in the kitchen, tension evident on their faces. "What's wrong?" Michael asked immediately. Rachel held up her phone. The diner owner called. "He said he'd reconsider firing me if I apologized to Curtis Reed publicly and convince your mother to meet with Croft about selling." Michael's jaw tightened. "And what did you say?" A defiant smile crossed Rachel's face. "I told him I'd rather wait tables in the next county than bow to Curtis Reed." Eleanor touched Rachel's hand gently. "You shouldn't have to lose your livelihood because of us." "I'm not losing it because of you." Rachel's eyes flashed with determination. "I'm losing it because I finally stood up to the people who've been slowly killing this town." Her voice softened. "Besides, I've applied for a manager position at the diner in Riverdale. The interview's next week." Michael studied them both, a plan forming in his mind. "We need to be strategic about this. Confronting Croft and Thorne directly won't work. They control the local system. We need to go outside their sphere of influence." He made a call to his former teammate who now worked with the FBI. The conversation was brief, coded in the way of men who had shared battlefield secrets. But when Michael hung up, his expression was more confident. "I have a friend looking into Croft's financial records and connections. If he's laundering money, there will be traces." The days that followed settled into a tense routine. Michael fortified the house with security cameras and motion sensors equipment from his military contacts that wouldn't be easily detected. Max became Emma's constant shadow, accompanying her to and from the school, his training making him the perfect guardian. Eleanor began cataloging the history of her land, finding old surveys and water rights documentation that might prove valuable. Ryan continued his documentary work, but now with a more focused purpose, gathering evidence rather than just stories. Rachel, despite the loss of her job, became an invaluable asset, connecting them with townspeople who had suffered under Croft's regime, but were too afraid to speak openly. A week after the diner incident, Emma came home from school visibly upset. Michael immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? Emma hesitated, then pulled out her phone showing a social media post from the daughter of a town council member. It showed Emma sitting alone at lunch with a caption reading, "Terrorist's kid. No one wants to sit with her because her dad threatens innocent businessmen." Michael's face darkened, but before he could respond, Emma continued, "I'm not upset about that, Dad. I know it's not true." Her chin lifted in a gesture so like her mother's that it caught Michael's heart. "I'm upset because 3 families have been forced to move away since we got here, and no one is doing anything about it." "That's not quite true, Em." Michael's voice was gentle but firm. "We're doing something. It just takes time to do it right." Later that night, Michael sat alone on the deck, staring out at the lake, where the moon cast a silver path across the still water. The door opened behind him, and Rachel stepped out, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "Mind if I join you?" Michael gestured to the chair beside him, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. Emma asleep. Finally, Rachel settled into the chair. "She's worried about you, you know. Says you get that look. That means you're planning something dangerous." A slight smile touched Michael's lips. Smart kid, like her father. Rachel studied him over the rim of her mug. "You are planning something, aren't you?" Michael was silent for a moment, weighing how much to share. Then he decided that Rachel had earned his trust. "I'm setting a trap. My FBI contact confirmed that Croft is under investigation for money laundering through his developments in 3 states. They suspect he's using the resorts to clean money for a drug cartel, but they haven't been able to get solid evidence." Rachel's eyes widened. "So that's why he's so desperate for your mother's land." Michael nodded. "The geological survey found a rare mineral deposit that runs right under her property, worth millions, possibly billions. He's promised his cartel partners access to it, which means he can't fail to deliver." He took a sip of coffee. "The FBI wants to catch them in the act, but they need proof of the cartel connection." "And how do you plan to get that?" Rachel's voice held concern. "By giving Croft what he wants, apparently." Michael's eyes glinted with strategic calculation. "We're going to make him think my mother is considering selling. Draw him out, make him reveal his partners." "That's dangerous, Michael. These aren't just corrupt small-town officials. If there's cartel involvement..." "I know." Michael's voice was steady. "That's why I need you, Ryan, and my mother to leave for a few days when the time comes." Rachel's expression turned stubborn. "Not happening. I didn't stand up to Curtis Reed just to run when things get serious." Michael started to argue, but something in Rachel's determined expression stopped him. It reminded him of his late wife, the same unwavering resolve when she'd made up her mind. He found himself studying Rachel's face in the moonlight, noticing for the first time the quiet strength in her features, the intelligence in her eyes. The moment was interrupted by a sound from the driveway. Tires on gravel. Michael was instantly alert, motioning for Rachel to stay quiet as he moved silently into the house. He checked the security camera feed on his tablet, tension easing slightly when he recognized Ryan's car. But something was wrong. Ryan stumbled from the vehicle, his face bloody, his camera equipment clearly damaged. Michael rushed outside, supporting the younger man as he collapsed against him. "They found my backup hard drive at the motel." Ryan's voice was strained, his eyes swelling shut. "Curtis and 2 guys I didn't recognize said they were sending a message." Michael helped him inside, his face grim, as Rachel gathered first aid supplies. "This changes things. They're escalating because they're getting desperate." The next morning, Michael called an emergency meeting in the living room. Eleanor, Emma, Rachel, Ryan, his face now sporting impressive bruises, and even Max gathered as Michael outlined what they knew and what he suspected. Croft needs Mom's land to fulfill his promise to the cartel. That makes him vulnerable. He's already under FBI surveillance, but they need concrete evidence linking him to the cartel. He turned to Ryan. "Did you manage to save any of your footage?" Ryan nodded carefully, wincing at the movement. "All of it. I keep everything backed up to an encrypted cloud account. They got my backup drive, but not the originals or the cloud versions." Michael nodded in approval. "Good man." He turned to the others. "Here's what we're going to do. Mom will reach out to Croft, say she's reconsidering his offer due to recent concerns about her family's safety. She'll request a meeting at the property to discuss terms. Eleanor's eyes showed understanding. You want to draw him out. Exactly. When Croft thinks he's about to get what he wants, he'll let his guard down. That's when we'll get the evidence the FBI needs. Emma, who had been listening intently, spoke up. What about me, Dad? What can I do to help? Michael's first instinct was to keep his daughter as far from danger as possible, but he recognized the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had gotten him through SEAL training. You're my early warning system, Em. You notice things other people miss. I need you to keep your eyes and ears open at school, report anything unusual. Emma nodded seriously, accepting her mission with the gravity it deserved. The plan was set in motion. Eleanor called Croft's office, leaving a carefully worded message about reconsidering his offer. The response was immediate. Croft himself called back within the hour, his tone jovial, but with an undercurrent of triumph. They arranged a meeting for the following evening at Eleanor's property. That night, as final preparations were being made, Emma discovered something while playing with Max in the yard, a small electronic device hidden in the hedges near the house. Michael identified it immediately as a surveillance bug, confirming his suspicions that Croft was monitoring them. Instead of removing it, Michael used it to their advantage, having staged conversations within its range about Eleanor's decision to sell, citing concerns about Emma's safety and Michael's inability to protect them from Croft's influence. The day of the meeting arrived. Michael positioned Ryan with his camera in a concealed location near the meeting point, ensuring he would have clear audio and video of the entire conversation. Rachel and Emma were instructed to remain in the house with Max, away from potential danger. As dusk approached, Michael performed a final security sweep, checking the small recording device he'd concealed in Eleanor's jacket and the backup cameras positioned around the property. His military training had taught him to leave nothing to chance, to plan for every contingency. Eleanor stood on the dock, looking out over the lake that had been in her family for generations. Michael approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do this, Mom. We can find another way. Eleanor covered his hand with her own. This land meant everything to your father. He believed in standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I'm not giving up our home, Michael. I'm just playing my part in protecting it. The sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention. 2 black SUVs pulled into the driveway, followed by a luxury sedan. Sterling Croft emerged from the sedan, a tall, impeccably dressed man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. Mayor Thorne exited one SUV while Curtis Reed and 2 unidentified men stepped from the other. Eleanor squared her shoulders and moved to meet them, the picture of a dignified elderly woman considering a difficult decision. Michael remained slightly behind her, his posture relaxed, but his senses hyper-alert, cataloging every detail. The bulge of a concealed weapon under Curtis's jacket, the nervous fidgeting of Mayor Thorne, the calculated charm in Croft's smile. Mrs. Sullivan, so pleased you've reconsidered. Croft's voice was smooth as aged whiskey, his handshake firm but not aggressive as he greeted Eleanor. I understand recent events have been concerning for your family. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. When one's home no longer feels safe, one must consider alternatives, Mr. Croft. A wise perspective. Croft gestured expansively at the property around them. You have a beautiful piece of land here. I can assure you my offer is more than generous. As they walked along the lakeshore, Croft outlined his vision for the resort, his plans for revitalizing the area, the economic benefits for the town. His words were practiced, persuasive, but beneath the polished veneer, Michael detected an urgency, a hunger that belied his calm exterior. The conversation progressed exactly as Michael had hoped. Croft, believing he was on the verge of success, became increasingly candid about his true intentions for the property. When Eleanor asked pointed questions about the geological survey, a flash of surprise crossed Croft's face before he recovered. You're well informed, Mrs. Sullivan. Yes, there are certain mineral resources that make this area particularly valuable. Resources that could benefit everyone involved. Eleanor maintained her role perfectly. And who exactly would be involved, Mr. Croft? I understand you have partners in this venture. Croft hesitated, then, with a glance at Michael, suggested they speak privately. Just business details that would bore your son, I'm sure. Michael prepared to object, but a subtle signal from Eleanor stopped him. She was following the plan, getting Croft to reveal more by playing to his underestimation of an elderly woman. As they moved a short distance away, Michael remained vigilant, knowing Ryan's cameras were capturing everything and that Eleanor's hidden microphone was recording every word. He watched as Croft spoke earnestly to his mother, occasionally gesturing toward the lake or the surrounding mountains. Suddenly, the calm of the evening was shattered by a shout from the house. Michael turned to see Emma running toward them, her face pale with fear. "Dad, they've got Rachel." Before Michael could react, Curtis Reed's hand moved to his concealed weapon. Michael's training kicked in instantly. He moved between Emma and Reed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Everyone stay calm." But the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Through the trees, Michael could see two men dragging Rachel from the house, her attempts to fight back hampered by her injured wrist. Max was nowhere in sight, which alarmed Michael. The dog would never willingly abandon Rachel or Emma unless something had happened to him. Croft's smooth facade cracked, revealing the ruthless operator beneath. His voice was cold as he addressed Michael. This could have been simple, Sullivan, a straightforward business transaction. Now it's become complicated. Michael's mind raced, calculating options, assessing threats. His priority was protecting Emma Eleanor and Rachel, but he was outnumbered and potentially outgunned. The FBI backup he'd arranged wasn't due to arrive for another 20 minutes, an eternity in a rapidly escalating situation. What happened next would determine not just the fate of the Sullivan family's land, but potentially their lives and the future of Pine Creek itself. Michael locked eyes with Croft, his expression revealing nothing of the strategic calculations happening behind them. The SEAL in him was fully awakened now, ready for whatever came next. Across the property, unseen by the gathering confrontation, Ryan continued filming his camera, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. And somewhere in the woods, a Belgian Malinois moved silently through the underbrush, following his training and his bond with Michael, circling to a position where he could be most effective when the moment came. The standoff had begun. The men holding Rachel tightened their grip as she struggled, her eyes finding Michael's across the yard. "Don't worry about me. Get Emma out of here." Michael's tactical assessment took milliseconds. Two armed men by Rachel, Curtis with a hand on his concealed weapon, Croft and Thorne standing back unarmed but dangerous, Emma exposed in the open yard, Eleanor vulnerable beside Croft, Ryan hidden but recording evidence that could bring them all down, and Max still unaccounted for, which meant either something had happened to the dog or he was positioning for an attack. Emma froze in the middle of the yard, suddenly aware of the danger she'd run into. The fear in her eyes sparked something primal in Michael, a fusion of father and warrior that narrowed his focus to crystal clarity. "Emma, go back to the house right now." Michael's voice carried the unmistakable command of someone who expected immediate obedience. "But Dad, they hurt Max, Now, Emma," the single word resonated with such authority that Emma backed away instinctively, her eyes wide. Croft stepped forward, his veneer of civility completely abandoned. "You've made this unnecessarily difficult, Sullivan. My associates require this property, and they're not accustomed to taking no for an answer." He gestured toward the men holding Rachel. "Consider this leverage to ensure your cooperation." Eleanor's hand clutched at her chest, but her voice remained steady. "You won't get away with this, Mr. Croft. There are authorities beyond your control." Croft laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Mrs. Sullivan, you'd be surprised at how far my influence extends. State police, FBI, I have friends everywhere." He turned to Michael. "Your military background is impressive, but surely you understand when you're outmatched. Sign the property over now, and everyone walks away unharmed." In that moment, a high-pitched whistle cut through the air, nearly imperceptible to human ears, but a command that Michael and Max had practiced countless times. The response was immediate and devastating. From the shadows behind the men, holding Rachel, a tan blur launched into action. Max struck with military precision, taking down one of Rachel's captors with a targeted attack to his arm. The man screamed, his grip on Rachel instantly released as Max's powerful jaws clamped down. The distraction was all Michael needed. He moved with the fluid efficiency of his SEAL training, covering the distance to Curtis Reed before the contractor could fully draw his weapon. A precise strike to Reed's wrist sent the gun clattering to the ground, followed by a swift combination that left the larger man dazed and stumbling backward. Rachel broke free from her remaining captor, driving her knee upward with perfect aim. The man doubled over in pain, and Rachel didn't waste the advantage, bringing her elbow down hard across his back. Emma, who had only retreated a few steps, seized the moment to dash back toward the house, exactly as Michael had hoped. Eleanor stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden explosion of violence. Mayor Thorne, seeing the tide turn, began backing toward the SUVs. I had no idea this wasn't the plan I never agreed to. Shut up, you spineless fool. Croft's command silenced the mayor instantly. His eyes narrowed as he assessed Michael with newfound respect and caution. Well, it seems we underestimated you. Again. But this isn't over. Michael stood between Croft and his family, his stance balanced and ready. You're right, it's not over. It's just beginning. He reached slowly into his pocket and removed his phone, holding it up for Croft to see. I've been recording this entire conversation, including your admission about your associates requiring this property. Croft's face darkened. That recording won't help you if you don't live to share it. The threat hung heavy in the air, but Michael remained unmoved. Before you make another mistake, you should know that a former teammate of mine in the FBI has every piece of evidence we've gathered. If anything happens to any of us, it all goes public immediately. A tense standoff ensued, broken only when the injured men began to regroup. Max stood beside Rachel, his posture alert and ready, a low growl rumbling from his chest. The dog's loyalty had shifted to include Rachel in his protected circle, a rare extension of his trained devotion. Croft's calculation was visible in his eyes, weighing options, assessing risks. Finally, he stepped back. This is merely a setback. You have no idea who you're dealing with. His gaze shifted to Eleanor. Your husband understood business, Mrs. Sullivan. He knew when to negotiate and when to step aside. You would do well to remember his example. Eleanor's spine straightened at the mention of her husband. My husband believed in standing against bullies, Mr. Croft. A lesson our son learned well. Croft's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure as he signaled for his men to retreat. They piled into the vehicles, Curtis Reed shooting a venomous glare at Michael as he nursed his injured wrist. The convoy peeled away from the property, leaving behind a cloud of dust and an unspoken promise of retaliation. As the vehicles disappeared down the driveway, the family's momentary relief was tempered by the knowledge that they had just escalated the conflict beyond any possibility of peaceful resolution. Ryan emerged from his hiding place camera, still recording his expression, a mixture of awe and terror. They'll be back, and next time they won't bother with negotiations. Rachel knelt beside Max, checking the dog for injuries. Finding only a minor cut above his eyes, she pressed her forehead against his whispering words of gratitude. Michael was already moving toward the house, his mind racing through contingencies. We need to move now. They'll regroup and return with more firepower. He turned to Ryan. Did you get everything? Ryan nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he checked his camera. Every word, including Croft's reference to his associates requiring the property and his threats. Michael made a series of rapid calls, first to his FBI contact, then to Doc Wilson, alerting him to prepare for possible injuries. Inside the house, he moved with purpose, gathering essential documents, weapons, and supplies. This was evacuation protocol embedded in his muscle memory from years of training and combat deployments. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her face pale but composed, a maturity beyond her years evident in her steady gaze. Max rested his head in her lap, providing silent comfort. Is this my fault, Dad? If I hadn't run out there. Michael paused in his preparations, kneeling beside his daughter. You did exactly what a Sullivan does. You tried to protect family, his hand gentle on her cheek. But next time, trust that I have a plan. Okay. Rachel and Eleanor worked efficiently, gathering medications, clothing, and personal items. Eleanor moved with remarkable composure for a woman who had just witnessed a violent confrontation on her beloved property. The steel that Michael had inherited was fully visible, now her hands steady as she packed photographs and mementos that couldn't be replaced. Within 20 minutes, they had loaded Michael's truck and Rachel's sedan with everything essential. Michael did a final sweep of the property, setting up motion-activated cameras that would alert them to any intruders. As he worked, the reality of what had just occurred and what might follow weighed heavily on him. He had brought his family here for peace and healing after losing his wife. Instead, he had plunged them into a dangerous conflict with powerful enemies. The FBI won't be able to mobilize a full team until morning at the earliest. Michael outlined the situation as they gathered by the vehicles. We need somewhere secure for the night. I know a place. Rachel's voice was quiet but confident. My family has a hunting cabin about 30 miles from here. It's off the grid, no electricity, no phone lines, accessible only by a private road. Nobody knows about the connection to me. Michael nodded his approval of the strategic choice. We'll take different routes, maintain radio silence except for emergencies. He divided them between the vehicles, Eleanor and Emma with him, Rachel driving with Ryan and Max. If anyone gets separated, proceed to the rendezvous point independently. Do not wait. Do not attempt to contact the others. The gravity of the situation settled over them as they prepared to leave the home that had become both sanctuary and battlefield. Emma clutched her father's hand, trying to be brave, but unable to hide her fear. Dad, what if they're watching the roads? Michael squeezed her hand gently. That's why we're going to use a tactic called unpredictable movement pattern. We never take the direct route, never maintain the same speed, and we watch for tails constantly. His smile held reassurance backed by absolute confidence in his skills. This isn't my first time evading enemy surveillance, Em. As they pulled away from the property, Michael caught a last glimpse of the house in his rearview mirror, silhouetted against the darkening sky. The place that should have been their new beginning now stood as a symbol of the battle they were fighting, not just for a piece of land, but for justice in a town that had forgotten the meaning of the word. The journey to the cabin took nearly 2 hours, their zigzagging route designed to detect and lose any potential followers. Michael drove with hyper-vigilant awareness, noting every vehicle they passed, identifying potential choke points and ambush locations from habit. Beside him, Eleanor stared out the window, her thoughts clearly on the confrontation with Croft. He knew James. My husband. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. They were business associates briefly back in the 80s. James backed out of a deal when he discovered Croft's methods were less than ethical. Her hand trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt. I never mentioned it because I didn't make the connection until today. When he spoke about James understanding business, it brought it all back. Michael processed this new information, connecting it to Croft's unusual personal interest in the property. This isn't just about the minerals under the land for him, is it? Eleanor shook her head. Your father prevented a major deal that would have made Croft millions. He also reported certain irregularities to the SEC. Nothing came of it. Croft was too careful, but it damaged his reputation in legitimate business circles. He had to start over. And now he has a chance for revenge while securing a valuable asset. Michael's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The personal vendetta explained Croft's obsession and his willingness to risk exposure. Rachel's cabin was exactly as she had described, rustic, isolated, and defensible. Nestled in a small clearing surrounded by dense pine forest, it offered limited approaches that could be easily monitored. Michael conducted a thorough perimeter check while Rachel lit kerosene lamps and started a fire in the wood stove. Inside the cabin was spare but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, 2 small bedrooms, and a basic kitchen with a hand pump for water. Solar battery packs allowed for minimal electricity, enough to charge phones and Ryan's camera equipment. The simplicity of the space created an odd sense of security, a return to basics that stripped away distractions and focused them on survival. As night settled over the forest, Michael established watch rotations. Despite their exhaustion, no one questioned the necessity. The reality of their situation had transformed them from a family and friends into something resembling a unit, each person understanding their role in keeping the others safe. During his watch, Michael sat on the cabin's small porch, the weight of his service pistol familiar against his side. The night sounds of the forest, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of pine boughs in the gentle wind brought back memories of long deployments, nights spent in hostile territory where every shadow might conceal an enemy. The door opened softly behind him as Rachel emerged, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. She settled beside him on the rough wooden bench, offering one of the mugs. I figured you could use some coffee. Seems like old times for you. Michael accepted the mug gratefully, the warmth seeping into his hands. Different terrain, same principles. He took a sip, appreciating the strong, bitter taste. You handled yourself well back there. Rachel's smile was faint in the darkness. My dad was the sheriff in my hometown before he retired. He made sure both his kids could take care of themselves. Her expression grew more serious. What's our next move? Michael outlined his plan using Ryan's footage as leverage, coordinating with the FBI to build a case against Croft and finding a way to protect Eleanor's property rights regardless of the outcome. But as he spoke, he realized Rachel was watching him with an expression that went beyond tactical assessment. You know what amazes me about you? Rachel's voice was soft but clear in the night air. Most men with your background who've seen what you've seen, they'd be broken. Or they'd be so hardened nothing could touch them. But you've managed to stay human, to be a father, a son, She hesitated, something unspoken passing between them before she continued. A protector without becoming just a weapon. Michael was silent for a moment, unaccustomed to such direct personal observation. I had a good example. My father showed me that strength isn't about force. It's about what you're willing to stand for. And after Emma's mother died, he paused, memories of his late wife bringing the familiar ache. I had to decide what kind of man I wanted my daughter to see, what kind of man I wanted to be. The conversation shifted to lighter territory. Rachel sharing stories of growing up in Pine Creek before Croft and Thorne's influence, Michael recounting some of the more humorous aspects of raising a daughter as a single father. In the midst of crisis, this quiet moment of connection offered a reminder of the world they were fighting to protect. Morning brought renewed focus and the arrival of Michael's FBI contact. Agent Daniel Harper was a compact man with calculating eyes and the focused demeanor of someone who never wasted motion or words. He reviewed Ryan's footage with professional detachment, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. This is compelling but still circumstantial. Harper's assessment was blunt. We need direct evidence of the cartel connection to make a federal case stick. Otherwise, it's just local corruption, serious, but not enough to bring in the full resources of the Bureau. The disappointment was palpable as the group absorbed Harper's words. Eleanor, who had been quietly observing the discussion, suddenly straightened. Mr. Harper, my husband, kept detailed records of all his business dealings, including his interactions with Sterling Croft. Would those be useful? Harper's interest was immediately piqued. Potentially very useful, Mrs. Sullivan, especially if they establish a pattern of behavior that connects to current activities. Where are these rare records? Eleanor's expression fell. In a safe deposit box, at Pine Creek Savings and Loan, right in the lion's den. Michael's mind was already calculating risks and options. The bank would be under Croft's influence, making a normal retrieval impossible. But they couldn't move forward without those documents. Harper considered the problem, then turned to Michael. You have specialized extraction experience, Sullivan. If I provide Bureau resources for intelligence and minimal backup, could you access that box? Michael felt the familiar, calm clarity that preceded complex operations. It would require precision timing, detailed intel on the bank's security systems, and a diversion substantial enough to draw attention away from their real objective. Yes, but I'll need help. His gaze shifted to Rachel and Ryan. While Harper made arrangements and gathered intelligence, Michael outlined his plan to the others. It was daring, possibly reckless, but offered their best chance of obtaining the evidence they needed. Rachel and Ryan would create a diversion, a very public confrontation with Curtis Reed that would draw attention and resources. Meanwhile, Michael and Harper would access the bank. Eleanor listened with growing concern. This is too dangerous. There must be another way. Michael took his mother's hands in his. Mom, this is what I was trained for. Trust me to do this right. His eyes conveyed what his words couldn't, that this wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about stopping Croft before his corruption destroyed more lives. Emma, who had been unusually quiet since the previous day's confrontation, suddenly spoke up. You're going to win, Dad. Not because you're stronger or smarter, but because you're fighting for something real. Her simple faith cut through the tension, reminding them all of what was at stake. The following morning, they put the plan into action. Rachel and Ryan returned to Pine Creek, staging a confrontation with Curtis Reed outside the town's busiest cafe, just as the morning crowd gathered for breakfast. Rachel, playing her role perfectly publicly, accused Reed of assault, fraud, and corruption, her voice carrying across the town square. Ryan captured everything on camera, making sure his presence was obvious rather than concealed. The commotion drew exactly the response they had anticipated. Reed's thugs, local police, and curious townspeople all converged on the scene. Across town, Michael and Harper approached the bank from the rear service entrance. Harper's FBI credentials secured them initial access, and Michael's specialized skills handled the more sophisticated security measures protecting the safe deposit vault. Eleanor had provided the key and authorization letter, giving them legitimate access once inside. The box contained exactly what they had hoped for: detailed records of James Sullivan's business dealings with Croft, including evidence of questionable financial transactions, threats, and most importantly, connections to individuals now known to be associated with cartels. James Sullivan had been more thorough than anyone could have imagined, preserving evidence for decades as insurance against the day when Croft might become a threat. Just as they secured the documents, Michael's phone vibrated with the emergency signal from Rachel. The diversionary confrontation had escalated beyond their expectations. Curtis Reed, pushed beyond his limit by Rachel's public accusations, had physically attacked her. The police, instead of intervening, were attempting to arrest Rachel for disturbance and slander. The operation now faced a critical decision point: complete the extraction of the documents or abort to assist Rachel. Michael felt the familiar pressure of command decisions where all options carried significant risks and potential sacrifice. Get these to safety. I'll handle the situation at the square. Michael transferred the documents to Harper's secure briefcase. If I'm not at the rendezvous in 30 minutes, proceed without me. Harper nodded, understanding the calculus of their situation. Sullivan, remember, you're not operating with military authority here. If you engage local law enforcement, I know the limits. Michael's response was clipped as he moved toward the exit. But I won't leave her to face this alone. Pine Creek's town square had descended into chaos by the time Michael arrived. A crowd had gathered, filming on phones as Rachel was pinned against a police cruiser by two officers. Curtis Reed stood nearby, blood streaming from his nose, where Rachel had clearly connected a solid hit before being restrained. Ryan continued filming, despite attempts by Reed's men to block his camera. Michael assessed the situation instantly, identifying the senior officer points of tactical advantage and potential threats in the crowd. Rather than rushing in with force, he approached calmly, his hands visible, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. Officer, I believe you are making a serious error in judgment. That woman was defending herself against a man who assaulted her yesterday, an assault that was reported and documented. The officer turned, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon until he registered Michael's controlled stance. This doesn't concern you, sir. Please step back. Michael didn't move, maintaining eye contact with the officer. I'm making it my concern, and I'm giving you an opportunity to de-escalate a situation that has at least 30 witnesses with cameras. His voice lowered slightly, including some capturing your selective enforcement. The uncertainty in this officer's eyes revealed the effectiveness of Michael's approach. The mention of witnesses and documentation introduced risk that Thorne and Croft might not be able to contain if the situation continued to unfold publicly. A tense negotiation followed, conducted in measured tones despite the charged atmosphere. Michael never raised his voice, never made threats, but systematically dismantled the officer's position with the precision of someone who understood both tactical psychology and small-town politics. The standoff ended with Rachel's release, pending investigation, a face-saving measure for the police that achieved Michael's immediate objective. As the crowd dispersed, Curtis Reed remained, his expression murderous despite his bloodied face. You're dead, Sullivan, all of you. Croft is going to bury you so deep they'll never find the bodies. Curtis's threat carried the desperate rage of a man who had failed his employer and knew the consequences would be severe. Michael regarded Reed with a mixture of pity and contempt. Mr. Reed, look around you. He gestured to the dispersing crowd, many still filming with their phones. Your threats, your intimidation, they only work in the shadows, and we've just dragged everything into the light. Reed's face contorted with fury, but before he could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID must have been significant because Reed's expression immediately shifted from rage to apprehension. He answered, turning away from Michael and Rachel, his posture stiffening as he listened. Michael used the distraction to usher Rachel and Ryan toward their vehicle, maintaining awareness of their surroundings as they moved. Reed's one-sided conversation seemed to grow increasingly tense, his responses limited to, "Yes, sir, and I understand." As they pulled away from the square, Rachel released a shaky breath. That was too close. Did Harper get the documents? Michael nodded, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for signs of pursuit. Everything we needed and more. My father documented every interaction with Croft for over 30 years. Harper thinks it's enough to open a formal investigation. Ryan, reviewing the footage he'd captured, let out a low whistle. Guys, you need to see this. He turned his camera display towards them, showing the final moments in the square. Reed, his back to Ryan's position, was still on the phone, but now the camera had captured a clear view of his face, drained of color, as he listened to the caller. More significantly, Ryan had zoomed in on Reed's phone, clearly displaying the caller ID as Alvarez. Michael's expression hardened with recognition. Sebastian Alvarez, upper management in the Sonora cartel. The cartel connection they'd been trying to prove had just been captured on camera, linking directly to Curtis Reed. The revelation transformed their understanding of the situation. Croft wasn't just doing business with the cartel, he was fully integrated into their operation. The stakes had just risen dramatically, as had the danger to everyone involved. That night, gathered in the safety of a bureau safe house, the group processed the day's developments. Harper had forwarded the evidence to his superiors, setting in motion a major interagency operation. But bureaucracy moved slowly and Croft's resources allowed him to move quickly. You should know Croft has increased security around your property. Harper shared the latest intelligence. Armed men, professional background. Likely cartel supplied. They're preparing for something significant. Eleanor's face showed the strain of recent days, but her resolve remained unshaken. They want what's under the land that badly. Harper hesitated before responding. It's not just the minerals anymore, Mrs. Sullivan. Croft has promised the cartel a new distribution hub, a location to move product through the resort development with minimal scrutiny. Your property is key to the entire operation, and after today's events, Croft is under enormous pressure to deliver or face consequences from his partners. The implications hung heavy in the air. Croft was now trapped between law enforcement closing in and cartel partners demanding results. A cornered Croft was infinitely more dangerous than the calculating businessman they'd faced before. Michael processed the tactical situation, considering options, resources, and vulnerabilities. The FBI's formal operation would take days to mobilize, fully time they likely didn't have. Croft would move soon, possibly within hours, to secure the property by any means necessary. As the others discussed protection details in safe houses, Michael stepped outside onto the porch of the safe house, needing space to think clearly. The night air carried the scent of approaching rain, the clouds obscuring the stars and casting the landscape in deeper shadow. Footsteps behind him announced Rachel's approach. "You've got that look again, the one that says you're planning something stupid and heroic." Michael didn't deny it. Harper's team won't be ready for at least 48 hours. Croft won't wait that long. Rachel leaned against the porch railing beside him. "So what's the play?" Her tone carried no judgment, only a desire to understand. "I need to force their hand. Draw them out, make them reveal themselves completely before they're ready. Make a mistake we can capitalize on." Michael turned to face her directly. "But I need you to keep Emma and my mother safe while I do it. No arguments, no heroics. Their safety is the priority." Rachel studied his face in the dim light, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You're going back to the property. Alone?" Michael nodded, his decision already made. "I'm going to end this tonight." The silence between them grew charged with unspoken emotions, concern, admiration, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. Rachel finally broke the silence, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "You know, most men try to impress a woman with dinner and flowers. Your courtship strategy needs serious work, Sullivan." The attempt at humor barely masked her genuine worry. Michael found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. "I'll keep that in mind for when this is over." His hand moved almost of its own accord, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "When, not if." The moment lingered, a fragile connection amid chaos and danger. Then Rachel straightened, her expression shifting to determination. "If you're doing this, you're not doing it completely alone." She held up her hand to forestall his objection. "I'm not going with you, but Max and I have been working on something that might help." Inside, as the others continued strategizing, Rachel led Michael to where Max rested near Emma, who had finally fallen asleep after the tension of the day. The dog immediately rose alert to their purpose. Rachel demonstrated a series of hand signals that Michael hadn't taught Max, specialized commands for perimeter defense, distraction tactics, and selenite takedowns. Max responded with perfect precision, his training transcending the bond with a single handler. "My brother taught me these before his last deployment." Rachel's voice carried pride mingled with old grief. "Max knows them now. He'll obey you absolutely, but he has these additional skills if you need them." The next hour was spent in careful preparation. Michael selected equipment from Harper's Supplies, focusing on non-lethal options that would incapacitate without killing. Despite the threat they faced, he remained determined to resolve the situation without bloodshed if possible. As he prepared to leave, Emma woke briefly, her sleepy voice stopping him at the door. "Dad, where are you going?" Michael knelt beside his daughter, brushing the hair from her forehead. "Just taking care of some unfinished business, Em. I'll be back before you know it." Emma's eyes, so like her mother's, held wisdom beyond her years. "Promise you'll be careful, not just for me, but for you too. Because you matter, Dad. Not just as my father or grandma's son, but as you." The simple truth of her words struck Michael deeply. Throughout his military career, and now as a father, he had defined himself by his duty to others. Emma was asking him to value himself as well, a perspective he had lost somewhere along the way. "I promise." He sealed the vow with a kiss to her forehead. "Now go back to sleep." We've got a lot to do tomorrow. Outside, Rachel waited by the car with Max. The dog was fitted with a specialized tactical vest equipped with a camera and communications device. Final preparations complete. Michael turned to Rachel, expecting last-minute instructions about Max's commands. Instead, she stepped forward and kissed him, brief but unmistakable in its meaning and emotion. That's not goodbye. That's incentive to come back in one piece. Michael stood momentarily stunned, then found himself smiling. Now that's effective motivation. As he drove toward the property with Max beside him, Michael considered the mission ahead. He wasn't just fighting for land or justice anymore. He was fighting for a future he had glimpsed in that unexpected moment with Rachel, a possibility of healing and new beginnings that had seemed impossible since losing his wife. The storm that had threatened all evening finally broke as Michael approached the property, rain lashing against the windshield and thunder rolling across the mountains. Nature itself seemed to be setting the stage for the confrontation to come. Michael parked well away from the main approach, using the weather and darkness as cover as he and Max made their final approach on foot. Through the driving rain, he could see lights at the house, multiple vehicles parked in the driveway, and armed men patrolling the perimeter despite the downpour. This was it. No backup, no second chances, just a man, a dome, and a determination to end the corruption that had poisoned an entire town. Michael checked his equipment one final time, then signaled to Max. They moved forward into the storm toward a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of the Sullivan property, but the future of Pine Creek itself. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the Sullivan property in stark relief against the darkness. The rain had intensified, creating a natural sound barrier that masked Michael and Max's approach. Through tactical binoculars, Michael counted 8 armed men patrolling the perimeter, professional security, not local muscle. Their methodical movements and equipment suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds, now repurposed for Croft's operation. Most revealing was the gathering inside the house. Through the large windows of the living room, Michael could see Croft himself pacing anxiously, gesturing as he spoke to a man Michael didn't recognize. The stranger's expensive suit and commanding presence suggested authority, likely the cartel connection they'd been trying to establish. Michael activated the secure communication device Harper had provided, transmitting the surveillance feed from his position. "This is Sullivan. I have visual confirmation of Croft and what appears to be cartel leadership on site. At least 8 armed security with tactical gear." Harper's response came through immediately. "Do not engage Sullivan. Documentation only. Bureau tactical team is still mobilizing." Michael watched as 3 more vehicles arrived at the property, black SUVs with tinted windows, disgorging more men and equipment. They were setting up for something major, not just a security presence. Through the rain-streaked window, Michael could see maps and documents spread across the dining room table, geological surveys and construction plans. They're accelerating their timeline. Michael's voice was low as he relayed his observations. Equipment suggests they're preparing for immediate excavation or construction. This isn't just security, it's an operational team. Before Harper could respond, the front door of the house opened. Croft and the unknown man stepped onto the covered porch, followed by Curtis Reed. Despite the weather, the stranger lit a cigar, the ember glowing orange in the darkness as the 3 men continued their discussion. Max tensed beside Michael, a low growl forming in his throat. Michael placed a steadying hand on the dog's neck, silencing him as they strained to hear the conversation. "The timing is unacceptable, Alvarez." Croft's voice carried on the wind, tense and defensive. "My people are working as quickly as possible." The man Alvarez took a long draw on his cigar before responding. 3 years of development and millions in investment, yet you cannot secure one piece of property from an old woman and her son. His accent was subtle but unmistakable, his tone casual yet threatening. "Perhaps we overestimated your capabilities." Curtis Reed shifted uncomfortably, his bandaged face still showing the damage from his confrontation with Rachel. "The Sullivan problem can be solved permanently. Tonight, my men are ready." Alvarez turned to Reed, studying him like a curious specimen. "And yet your previous attempts have failed spectacularly." The woman remains unintimidated. The son proves more resourceful than anticipated. "And now we have federal attention." It was Croft who answered, his usual composure cracking under pressure. "That won't be an issue after tonight. The geological team confirms the primary deposit is accessible through the northeastern section of the property. Once extraction begins, ownership disputes become irrelevant." A chill that had nothing to do with the rain ran through Michael as the implications became clear. They weren't planning to force a sale anymore. They were going to take what they wanted, regardless of legal ownership, using their corrupt local influence to delay any response until it was too late. Alvarez seemed satisfied with this approach. Very well. You have 24 hours to begin extraction. After that, my organization will reconsider our partnership. His meaning was unmistakable. Failure would have fatal consequences for Croft. As the men returned inside, Michael transmitted the recorded conversation to Harper. This changes the tactical situation. They're moving tonight, not waiting for legal channels. If we don't stop them now, the damage will be done before your team arrives. Harper's response crackled through after a moment of silence. You're not authorized to engage Sullivan. Evidence collection only. My team will be there by morning. But Michael had already made his decision. By morning, the excavation would have begun destroying both the property and the evidence of Croft's operation. The careful by-the-book approach wasn't an option anymore. He surveyed the property once more, identifying approach vectors, guard positions, and potential entry points. The storm provided ideal cover, reducing visibility and masking sounds that might otherwise alert security. But it also complicated his own tactics, limiting equipment options and increasing risk. Max seemed to sense the shift in Michael's intent, his body tensing in anticipation. Michael removed the communication device Harper had provided, placing it in a waterproof container hidden beneath a fallen log. If things went wrong, the transmission would provide evidence of what had occurred. He turned to Max, using the hand signals Rachel had taught him to communicate their approach. The dog's intelligence and training would make him an invaluable asset, not just for attack capabilities, but for distraction and intelligence gathering. Their first target was a guard stationed near the boathouse, isolated from the others by about 50 yards. Michael circled downwind, using the rain and darkness to approach within striking distance. The guard never saw the blow coming, a precise strike to the base of the skull that rendered him unconscious without permanent damage. Michael secured the man with tactical restraints, appropriating his radio and security credentials. Max stood watch alert for any approach as Michael changed into the guard's rain gear and cap, creating a passable disguise at a distance. They proceeded methodically, neutralizing 2 more perimeter guards using similar non-lethal tactics. Each time, Michael secured the unconscious men in concealed positions where the weather would protect them from exposure but prevent immediate discovery. With 3 guards eliminated, Michael had created a corridor of access to the main house. He approached the rear entrance, Max moving silently at his heel. Through the kitchen window, he could see 2 men in suits, not guards, but associates of Alvarez, reviewing documents at the counter while drinking coffee. Michael keyed the appropriated radio, mimicking the terse communication style he'd observed from the guards. Movement at the northwest perimeter. Possible intruder. The response was immediate. 2 guards from the front of the house moved to investigate, creating the diversion Michael needed. He used the guard's security card to access the rear door, slipping inside with Max as the storm covered the sound of their entry. The kitchen connected to a utility room that offered temporary concealment. Michael could hear Croft and Alvarez in the adjacent dining room, their voices raised in technical discussion about extraction methods and timelines. Curtis Reed's distinctive grumble added to the conversation, focused on security concerns and transportation logistics. Michael signaled Max to stay, then moved silently toward the dining room entrance, positioning himself to overhear and observe without being detected. The documents spread across the table confirmed his worst fears, detailed plans for a rapid extraction operation that would irreparably damage the property while harvesting the mineral deposits beneath. More damning were the financial projections that explicitly outlined the money laundering mechanism through the resort development. Most concerning was a separate set of documents, personnel files on the Sullivan family, including surveillance photos of Eleanor, Emma, and Rachel. These weren't just business adversaries to Croft. They were targets marked for elimination once the operation was complete. Michael recorded everything with a small camera, documenting each incriminating detail. As he worked, the conversation in the dining room took an ominous turn. The Sullivan problem requires immediate resolution. Alvarez's tone left no room for interpretation. My team can handle it cleanly, but requires exact locations. Croft spread out another map, this one marked with red circles. According to our intelligence, they're being housed at an FBI safe house on Ridgeline Road. Minimal security, primarily electronic. Michael froze. Harper had assured him that the safe house location was known only to a small, trusted team. The fact that Croft had this information meant a serious security breach, possibly within the FBI itself. Curtis Reed leaned over the map, his finger stabbing at one of the marked locations. "We can hit all three locations simultaneously. The old woman, the kid, and Sullivan himself. Make it look like accidents or local criminal activity." Michael had heard enough. The threat to his family overrode all other considerations. He needed to warn Harper about the compromised safe house and get his family moved immediately. But first he needed to disable Croft's operation to buy time. He retreated silently to the utility room where Max waited, formulating a plan that would create maximum disruption with minimal risk. The house's electrical panel was located in this room, a modern smart system that controlled not just power but security and communications as well. Michael removed a small device from his tactical vest, a localized EMP designed to disable electronic systems without permanent damage. Normally used for disabling vehicle electronics in combat zones, it would serve perfectly to cripple the house's systems. He positioned the device against the main panel, set the timer for 60 seconds, and moved quickly back toward the kitchen. The exit route was temporarily clear, offering a clean escape path until Curtis Reed unexpectedly entered the kitchen, heading for the refrigerator. The two men locked eyes in a moment of mutual recognition and shock. Reed recovered first, reaching for the weapon at his hip as he shouted an alarm. Michael closed the distance in two rapid strides, driving his shoulder into Reed's midsection before the larger man could draw his weapon. They crashed into the kitchen island dishes, in glasses shattering around them. Reed was surprisingly strong, his bulk powered by desperate fear of failing his employers again. He landed a heavy blow to Michael's ribs, temporarily stunning him. Max responded instantly to the threat, launching himself at Reed with military precision. His jaws clamped around Reed's wrist, preventing him from drawing his weapon and providing Michael the moment he needed to regain advantage. The kitchen door burst open as two of Alvarez's men responded to the commotion. Michael registered the immediate threat, shifting tactics from subdual to escape. He grabbed a canister from his vest, pulling the pin and rolling it toward the newcomers as he simultaneously signaled Max to release Reed. The flashbang detonated with disorienting force, filling the kitchen with blinding light and deafening sound. In the same instant, the EMP activated, plunging the house into total darkness as every electronic system failed simultaneously. Michael grabbed Max's tactical vest, guiding the dog toward the rear exit as shouting and confusion erupted throughout the house. Emergency lighting should have activated, but remained dark, compromised by the EMP. The resulting chaos was exactly what Michael had intended: Croft's men stumbling in darkness, communication systems down, security protocols disrupted. They cleared the house just as gunfire erupted inside Alvarez's jumpy security team, shooting at shadows in the confusion. Michael and Max disappeared into the storm, using the darkness and continuing chaos to make their escape. Once clear of the immediate danger zone, Michael retrieved the communication device he'd hidden earlier. The EMP's effects wouldn't reach this far, allowing him to warn Harper about the compromised safe house. "Harper, this is Sullivan. Safe house location has been compromised. Croft has detailed intelligence on your operation and is planning to hit multiple targets tonight." He transmitted the images he'd captured of the maps and personnel files. "You need to move my family immediately." Harper's response was immediate, his tone reflecting the severity of the situation. "Already in progress. We have a mole alert protocol activated. New location info will come through secure channel Delta only. What's your status?" Michael provided a brief situation report, including the evidence he'd gathered in the current state of Croft's operation. "I've bought us some time. Their systems are down and they're in disarray, but they'll regroup quickly. We need to move before they recover." Harper's next words carried reluctant approval. "Good work, Sullivan. But get clear now. Bureau Tactical is inbound ETA 40 minutes. I'll have extraction coordinates for you within 10. Michael acknowledged, then continued moving away from the property, circling toward a predetermined rendezvous point where he'd left his vehicle. Max kept pace beside him, the dog's training evident in his focused vigilance despite the continuing storm. As they reached the vehicle, Michael's secure phone activated with an incoming transmission. He expected Harper's extraction coordinates, but instead found himself looking at Emma's face on the screen. "Dad, are you okay?" Her voice was frightened but controlled, a testament to her growing maturity. "Mom says something's wrong and we have to leave right away, but she wouldn't tell me what happened." Michael kept his tone reassuring despite his concern. "Everything's fine, Em. Just a change of plans. Where's Agent Harper?" Emma glanced over her shoulder. "He's arguing with someone on the phone. He looks really mad." The view shifted as Emma turned the phone to show Harper engaged in an intense conversation, his expression dark with anger and concern. Rachel's in the background, helping Eleanor gather their belongings for rapid departure. Michael's tactical assessment of the situation shifted immediately. Harper's body language and the hurried evacuation suggested the compromise might be worse than initially thought. Emma put Rachel on, please, right now. The phone changed hands, Rachel's worried face replacing Emma's on the screen. What's going on, Michael? They're moving us, but won't say why. Michael didn't waste time on reassurances. The safe house is compromised. Croft knows your location and is sending people. Is Max's backup vest there? Rachel nodded, understanding immediately. In the hall closet. You think we need it? I think Max and I won't reach you before Croft's people. Michael's mind raced through contingencies, calculating distances and response times. Harper's reinforcements were inbound, but might not arrive in time. Put Emma and my mother in the panic room and activate the vest. If anyone approaches before extraction, Max's programmed protection protocols will engage remotely. As Rachel moved to follow his instructions, Michael redirected his vehicle toward the safe house, pushing to maximum speed despite the dangerous road conditions. The storm had intensified, turning rural roads into treacherous flowing channels that threatened to sweep vehicles off the pavement. Harper's voice came through on the secure channel. Sullivan, we have confirmation of vehicles approaching the safe house from multiple directions. Tactical team is being redirected, but won't arrive in time. Backup safe house transport is still 10 minutes out. Michael processed this information grimly. His family was effectively trapped with hostile forces closing in and extraction still minutes away. Even at his current breakneck pace, he was at least 15 minutes from reaching them. A solution formed in his mind, dangerous, potentially reckless, but offering their best chance. Harper, I need remote access to Max's backup vest, now. There was a momentary hesitation before Harper responded. Understood, patching you through to control systems. Michael's phone screen shifted to a tactical interface connected to the K9 vest systems. Rachel had activated it as instructed, establishing the link that would allow Michael to control Max's counterpart remotely. The vest contains sophisticated systems designed for situations exactly like this, allowing a handler to direct a trained dog from a distance. Through the vest's camera, Michael could see Rachel, Eleanor, and Emma in the safe house's secure room. Max's backup vest was fitted to a second dog, a German Shepherd, that Harper's team kept as part of their standard equipment. Emma knelt beside the dog, her hand gently stroking its head as she whispered reassurances. The dog's training was evident in its calm alertness, despite the tension filling the room. Michael activated the audio connection. Rachel Shepherd is now under my remote command. Standard protection protocols are active, but I can override if needed. The vest had been programmed with Max's training patterns and responses, essentially allowing Michael to project his partner's capabilities to this location. Rachel nodded, her expression showing both fear and determination. They're getting closer. We can hear vehicles outside. Harper's voice cut through on a separate channel. Sullivan, we have visual on 3 SUVs approaching the safe house perimeter. Armed individuals deploying in tactical formation. Our response team is still 7 minutes out. The safe house's security system showed the approaching threat, professional operators moving with disciplined precision toward the building from multiple angles. These weren't Curtis Reed's local thugs. They were Alvarez's cartel soldiers trained and equipped for exactly this kind of operation. Michael made a rapid decision, activating the K9 vest's advanced features. Rachel, I need you to release Shepherd into the main house area. Close the panic room behind him. Rachel hesitated. The dog is our only protection if they breach the room. Trust me. Michael's voice carried absolute confidence despite the fear gripping his heart. I'm going to create a diversion that will draw them away from your location. Releasing Shepherd is part of that plan. Rachel nodded, her faith in him overriding her natural caution. She opened the panic room door, giving Shepherd a hand signal that sent him into the main living area, then secured the heavy door behind him. Through the vest's camera, Michael could now see the safe house interior from the dog's perspective. He activated the vest's two-way audio effectively, turning Shepherd into both his eyes and his voice within the house. Using the remote interface, Michael directed Shepherd through the house, positioning him strategically as the first intruders breached the perimeter sensors. The safe house's conventional security systems began their automated response, but would provide only momentary delay against such a well-equipped assault team. Michael activated another feature of the vest, a specialized audio projection system designed for tactical diversion. Through this system, he could make it appear that his voice was coming from wherever Shepherd was positioned. As the first intruder carefully entered through a side door, Michael triggered the system. "I've been expecting you," the voice projected from Shepard's position in the shadows of the living room, startling the intruder into raising his weapon. Michael directed Shepard to move silently to another position, projecting his voice again from a different location. "You're making a serious mistake. The FBI has this house under surveillance. Every one of you is being identified right now." The psychological impact was immediate. The intruders had expected to find vulnerable targets, not a prepared defender who seemed to be anticipating their every move. Their formation tightened focus, shifting from search patterns to defensive posture. Michael continued the deception, using Shepard to project movement sounds from multiple locations while vocally implying the presence of armed defenders throughout the house. The cartel team began checking corners more cautiously, their advance slowing significantly as uncertainty eroded their confidence. Meanwhile, Michael maintained his desperate drive toward the safe house, using back roads and alternate routes to avoid possible checkpoints. The storm worked to his advantage, now reducing visibility for any watchers, while his military training allowed him to navigate the treacherous conditions. Harper's voice came through again, tension evident despite his professional control. "Sullivan extraction team is 3 minutes out. Tactical response now 5 minutes behind them. Can you maintain the diversion?" Michael checked the vest's camera feed, noting the increasing caution in the intruder's movements. "It's working for now, but they'll figure it out eventually. 5 more minutes might be enough." He directed Shepard to a new position near the kitchen, then activated one of the vest's more aggressive features, a recorded playback of Max's attack bark combined with sounds of tactical movement. The audio projection created a convincing illusion of K-9 units preparing to engage. The psychological warfare tactic yielded immediate results. The intruders began a whispered consultation, clearly reassessing the risk-reward calculation of their mission. Michael could see the team leader communicating via hand signals, directing a more cautious approach while requesting updates from outside observers. Just when the deception seemed on the verge of failing, emergency lights appeared in the distance, the extraction team Harper had dispatched. The cartel team spotted the approaching vehicles and made a rapid decision to abort, retreating through their entry points with professional discipline. Michael monitored their withdrawal through Shepard's camera, maintaining the audio deception until the last intruder had cleared the building. Only when Harper confirmed that the extraction team had secured the perimeter did he finally allow himself a moment of relief. Rachel's voice came through, shaky but controlled. "They're gone. The FBI team is here. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. 10 minutes out." Michael felt the adrenaline that had sustained him beginning to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Stay with the extraction team. They'll get you to the secondary location safely." The next hour passed in a blur of coordination, secure transports, and tactical repositioning. By the time Michael reached the new safe house, a fortified bureau facility outside Pine Creek's jurisdiction, the combined stress of the night's activities had left him running on nothing but determination and training. Emma launched herself into his arms the moment he walked through the door, her slender body trembling with the release of fear she'd kept controlled throughout the ordeal. "You came back. You always come back." Michael held his daughter tightly, the reality of how close he'd come to losing her hitting with physical force. "Always, Em. That's a promise." Eleanor approached more slowly, her face showing the strain of recent events, but her eyes clear and determined. "This isn't about our land anymore, is it?" Her perception cut through pretense, reaching the heart of what they now faced. Michael shook his head, keeping one arm around Emma while meeting his mother's gaze. "It stopped being about the land the moment they threatened my family." Harper entered from an adjacent room, his expression grimmer than Michael had seen it yet. "We've identified the breach." Assistant Director Kellerman was working with Croft, providing information, redirecting investigations, bearing evidence. His face hardened. "He's been taken into custody, but the damage is done. Croft now knows we're building a case, and he's accelerated his timeline." Rachel joined them, her hand finding Michael's in a gesture of support that felt both new and somehow familiar. "So what happens now?" Harper's answer was direct and professional. "We've got enough to move on Croft Reed and their local network. Alvarez is more complicated. We need to catch him on U.S. soil, which won't be easy now that he's been alerted." But Michael was already thinking beyond the immediate tactical situation to the larger strategic problem. Croft's operation wasn't just about money laundering or mineral rights anymore. It represented a cartel attempt to establish infrastructure within American borders, a precedent that would inspire similar operations throughout the country if successful. "We need to draw them back in." Michael's tactical mind was already forming a plan. Croft is under pressure from Alvarez to deliver results. If he believes he can still secure the property and neutralize the threat we represent, he'll take one more shot. His gaze met Harper's, and this time we'll be ready. The next 24 hours were devoted to preparation. While Eleanor and Emma remained at the secure facility, Michael, Rachel, and Harper worked with the FBI tactical team to transform the Sullivan property into an elaborate trap. Every approach was covered by surveillance, every room wired for evidence collection, and a full tactical response team positioned in concealed locations throughout the surrounding forest. Michael insisted on being present for the operation, his unique knowledge of both the property and Croft's methods, making him an invaluable asset. Rachel, despite Harper's objections, refused to be sidelined as well. Her fierce determination and growing tactical skills eventually won Harper's reluctant approval for her to serve as part of the surveillance team. The bait was carefully crafted, a leaked memo suggesting that Eleanor Sullivan had reconsidered Croft's offer following the attack on the safe house. The document included details of a meeting scheduled at the property to finalize terms with only Michael, Eleanor, and their lawyer present. To sell the deception, Michael and Rachel returned to the property, openly making a show of inspection and preparation that would be visible to Croft's surveillance. They moved with the confidence of people who believed the immediate threat had passed, creating an illusion of vulnerability that would be difficult for Croft to resist. As darkness fell, they completed final preparations before taking their positions. Rachel, now equipped with tactical gear and communications, would monitor the perimeter surveillance from a concealed location in the boathouse. Michael and Max would remain in the main house presenting the primary target, while the FBI tactical team maintained hidden positions throughout the property. In the quiet moment before operations began, Michael found Rachel making final checks on her equipment. Her transformation from small-town waitress to tactical operator might have seemed incongruous if he hadn't witnessed her natural aptitude and determination firsthand. "You know, when this is over, we should probably have that dinner you mentioned." Michael's attempt at casual conversation barely masked the deeper current between them. Rachel looked up, a smile touching her lips, despite the tension of the moment. "Are you asking me on a date, Sullivan, in the middle of an FBI operation against a drug cartel?" The absurdity of their situation struck them both simultaneously, releasing some of the accumulated stress in a moment of quiet laughter. When Rachel spoke again, her voice carried a softness he hadn't heard before. "When this is over, really over, I'd like that." Her eyes met his, conveying meaning beyond the simple words. "But first, let's make sure there is an after for us to enjoy." The operation commenced at precisely 10:00 p.m. when surveillance picked up the first signs of approaching vehicles. Unlike the previous night's chaotic confrontation, this would be a controlled operation with full bureau support and authorization. Every movement, every word would be recorded as evidence for the case Harper was building. Croft arrived with a smaller entourage than expected, just 2 vehicles containing himself, Curtis Reed, and 4 security personnel. Conspicuously absent was Alvarez, suggesting either caution or a loss of direct support from the cartel. Michael took his position in the living room, presenting the appearance of a man confident in his security, yet unprepared for the level of threat approaching. Max lay at his feet, seemingly relaxed but alert to Michael's every signal. The security team performed a perimeter check before Croft and Reed approached the front door. Michael let them ring twice before answering, maintaining the pretense of normal business hours despite the unusual timing. Croft's smile was a masterpiece of false civility as he stood on the threshold. "Mr. Sullivan, thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice. I understand your mother has reconsidered our offer." Michael maintained his role perfectly, revealing nothing of the operation surrounding them. "She has concerns after recent events, but is open to discussion. Please come in." He stepped aside, allowing Croft and Reed to enter, while noting the security personnel remaining outside, exactly as the tactical plan had anticipated. As they moved to the living room, Michael observed the subtle changes in both men since their last encounter. Croft's polished exterior showed cracked signs of stress in the tightness around his eyes, and the slightly disheveled appearance of a man who hadn't slept properly in days. Reed was even more transformed, his previous swaggering confidence replaced by nervous vigilance and a haunted expression that suggested he understood exactly how precarious his position had become. "I was surprised to receive your call." Michael began the conversation, activating the recording devices with a subtle gesture disguised as straightening his shirt. "After our last interaction, I assumed negotiations were off the table." Croft settled into an armchair, his posture deliberately casual despite the tension radiating from him. Business is business, Mr. Sullivan. Disagreements happen, but wise men find paths to mutual benefit. Reed remained standing, his attention divided between the conversation and constant scans of the room. His hand never strayed far from his concealed weapon, betraying his expectation of trouble, despite the supposedly peaceful nature of the meeting. Michael guided the conversation with careful precision, extracting increasingly incriminating statements from both men as they outlined revised terms for the property purchase. Croft, believing he was negotiating from a position of strength, became progressively more candid about the true nature of his development plans. The proposed resort is merely phase one. Croft leaned forward, warming to his subject as greed overcame caution. The mineral deposits alone justify the investment, but the long-term infrastructure possibilities are the real prize. Your mother's property sits at the nexus of transportation corridors that could revolutionize distribution networks across 3 states. Michael maintained his role as interested negotiator while gathering exactly the evidence Harper needed. And your investors understand the value of this strategic position. Croft nodded, pride temporarily overriding discretion. They recognize vision when they see it. Our Mexican partners in particular appreciate the unique advantages this location provides. The conversation continued in this vein, with Croft progressively revealing more details of the operation in his eagerness to close the deal. Reed grew increasingly uncomfortable, clearly recognizing the dangerous territory into which Croft was venturing, but unwilling to directly contradict his boss. Just as the evidence gathering reached its peak, one of Croft's security men burst through the door, his expression panicked. "We've got company, federal vehicles approaching from the main road. Multiple units." The carefully constructed facade collapsed instantly. Croft's civility vanished, replaced by cold calculation as he assessed his options. Reed drew his weapon, pointing it directly at Michael. This was a setup all along. Michael remained calm, his eyes steady as he faced the barrel of Reed's gun. "It's over, Curtis. The property is surrounded. Every word of this conversation has been recorded, and federal agents are moving in as we speak. There's nowhere to run." For a moment, it seemed Reed might actually pull the trigger. His finger tightened perceptibly on the trigger as rage and fear battled across his features. Then a new voice entered the confrontation. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Rachel stood in the doorway, her borrowed FBI tactical gear and steady aim transforming her from small-town waitress to formidable operator. The first shot fired turns this from a major felony to a death penalty case. Outside, the sounds of the FBI tactical team moving into position became unmistakable voices on loudspeakers, ordering Croft's security team to surrender vehicles, establishing a perimeter, agents securing the grounds. Croft's response was not what Michael expected. Instead of desperate denial or attempts to flee, a strange calm settled over him. He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, and turned to Michael with an almost admiring expression. "Well played, Mr. Sullivan. Your father would be proud." He always did have an annoying talent for recognizing people's true nature. His gaze swept the room, taking in the hidden cameras now revealed by blinking indicator lights. "I assume Assistant Director Kellerman has been handled." Michael said nothing, letting the evidence of Croft's extensive corruption speak for itself. The moment extended a silent acknowledgement between opponents that the game had concluded. Curtis Reed, however, lacked Croft's composure. Panic and desperation transformed his face as he recognized the totality of his defeat. With a strangled cry of rage, he swung his weapon toward Croft. "You promised we'd be protected. You said nothing could touch us." Michael reacted instantly, signaling Max with a command so subtle it was almost imperceptible. The dog launched into action, targeting Reed's gun arm with precision born of thousands of hours of training. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as Reed crashed to the floor, Max maintaining a controlled hold without inflicting serious injury. Federal agents flooded the room, securing both Croft and Reed as Rachel moved to Michael's side. For a moment, they stood together, watching as the men who had terrorized Pine Creek were led away in handcuffs, the visible end of a corruption that had poisoned the town for years. Harper approached, professional satisfaction evident beneath his composed exterior. "Clean operation, Sullivan. We've got Alvarez's people in custody at the perimeter and enough evidence to put Croft away for decades." His expression softened slightly. "Your family can come home now." The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks with the methodical precision of federal justice. Croft Reed and their network of corrupt officials faced multiple indictments. Mayor Thorne resigned in disgrace before being arrested on conspiracy charges. Assistant Director Kellerman's cooperation led to additional arrests within the cartel's American operation. For Pine Creek itself, the process of healing began with the appointment of an interim administration, untainted by connection to Croft's operation. Federal oversight ensured transparency as the town began rebuilding its governance and community trust. Eleanor's property remained untouched, its natural beauty preserved, while ethical geologists assessed how the mineral deposits might be responsibly managed for the benefit of the community rather than criminal exploitation. The discovery created opportunities for legitimate economic development that would support the town for generations. 1 month after the arrest, Michael stood on the dock at the lake's edge, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The beauty of the place seemed more profound now that it had been fought for and preserved. Max lay beside him, the dog's relaxed posture reflecting the peace that had finally returned to their lives. Footsteps on the wooden planks announced Rachel's approach. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, offering one to Michael as she joined him at the water's edge. They stood in comfortable silence, the events of recent weeks having forged a connection that transcended conventional relationship timelines. Town council approved my business loan today. Rachel broke the silence, a smile evident in her voice. Mountain View Diner will officially have a new owner next month. Michael turned to her, genuine pleasure warming his expression. From waitress to owner in one dramatic career shift. Impressive. Rachel's laugh carried across the water, free and unrestrained in a way that would have been impossible under the shadow of Croft's influence. I had a good teacher in courage and new beginnings. Behind them, the lights of the Sullivan house glowed warm against the gathering dusk. Through the large windows, they could see Eleanor and Emma in the kitchen, preparing dinner together, their movements conveying the easy comfort of family, restored to security and peace. Michael found himself considering the journey that had brought them to this moment, from that first confrontation in the diner to the complex operation that had freed Pine Creek from Croft's grip. Every decision, every risk had led to this quiet evening beside the lake. You know what I've realized? Michael's voice was thoughtful as he gazed across the water. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought for countries or causes. They're fought for kitchen lights and coffee on the dock and the right to build something that's truly yours. Rachel's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. Is that what you're doing now? Building something that's truly yours? Michael considered the question, feeling the weight of possibilities it contained. For years after losing his wife, he had focused solely on protecting what remained. Emma, his mother, the legacy his father had left. Defense had become his definition of success. But now, standing beside Rachel with their hard-won peace surrounding them, he recognized the opportunity for something more. I think I'm finally ready to try. His words carried the quiet certainty of a man who had found his way through darkness to an unexpected light. As twilight deepened around them, Emma's voice called from the house announcing dinner with the enthusiasm of a child secure in her world. Michael and Rachel turned together toward the warm light of home, Max trotting ahead of them up the path. The Sullivan property stood as it had for generations, trees whispering in the evening breeze, lake waters lapping gently against the shore. But now it held something new as well. The promise of a future built not just on the foundations of the past, but on the courage to begin again.